Hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's over a year now into a Labour government, and Britain continues to face a cost of living crisis. As Rachel Reeves prepares a budget, vulnerable households across the UK are going into another winter facing a choice of heating or eating, while struggling to pay the rent or the mortgage and falling further into debt. Despite significant defeats over the winter fuel allowance and cuts to disability benefits, the government has still committed itself imposed fiscal rules in the hope of appeasing the bond markets. Inevitably, this will mean more cuts and austerity unless the budget looks at creative ways to tax wealth and preventing the billionaires exploiting loopholes. Much of the debate in the media is about asking how Reeves can double down on attempts to attack welfare benefits and perhaps even break her manifesto pledges not to increase the rate of income tax, further squeezing the living standards of ordinary people. But it doesn't have to be this way. So tonight we're going to hear from socialist MPs, from leading trade unionists and campaigners that an alternative approach is possible and looking at what a people's budget would look like. So without further ado, our first speaker is Steve Wright. Steve was elected General Secretary of the Fire Brigades Union earlier this year and has lost no time in speaking up for his members and holding the Labour Party leadership to account for its mistakes. So over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Kate. And look, I'll start by saying this. There's been a lot of chatter, probably the longest run up to a budget that I can remember, at least in my lifetime. It seems to be talked about for a long time. But there's lots of talk around that we cannot return to austerity and we need to move on from that era. Well, I'll tell you for what, our members are still experiencing austerity. There has been no change for them. And we're on the front line of continuing cuts to the fire and rescue service right now. We are starting to run campaigns because Labour-run councils are pushing through quite drastic cuts, cuts that are going to close fire stations, cut the number of firefighters we've got working in fire stations and in communities, and also talking about cutting the amount of firefighters that are on a fire engine. But dangerous levels that is going to not only put firefighters at risk, it's going to put members of the public at risk. So look, austerity is very real. Austerity is very real for firefighters' families. The cost of living crisis that you mentioned, Kate, is still alive and kicking. And look, we're on the front line trying to combat that. But I think as a union that is affiliated to Labour, that we are a voice in that room and we are clearly making the case that there needs to be a reversal of the years of austerity. I don't think it's a case of standing still any longer. I think our communities have had the heart ripped out of them for far too long. And I'm struggling to tell my members that the finger of blame points directly to the Tories on this. And we can talk extensively about the damage that has been done. But our members voted for change. They voted to see something different. They want to see an alternative economic situation put in front of them, and we're not seeing that. So I think there's some questions that we need to make sure that we're put in front and centre with Rachel Reeves. And I've done that today as a General Secretary, as part of the Trade Union Liaison Group. And that we need to know what side Labour is really on. We need to know if they're serious about lifting people out of poverty. For example, the children that could quite easily lift out of poverty. We need to know if they are going to improve and invest in public services. We need to know if they're going to extend their commitment to public ownership. We need to know whether they're going to protect the vulnerable in our society. We need to make sure that they're doing all of those things and that Labour actually represents Labour. I see that firmly as a job, as a General Secretary of a trade union, to hold them to account and make sure that they do start delivering for working people and stop pandering to the right. We have seen that this week. I think actually it's a new low for the Labour Party right now with the rhetoric that the Home Secretary is coming out with. I think as a Labour member for many years, I've been disgraced by what she has said. And we need to start turning the Labour into a Labour Party that delivers for us. A Labour Party talking about the issues that John McDonnell, who will speak soon, that he talked about. That's the Labour Party that we need. And there's been lots of discussion about whether our union should stay affiliated to the Labour Party. I say yes, that we don't run away from fires and we don't run away from fights. We stay in that party and we turn it back to what we think it should be. And we won't win everything, but I think there's a real opportunity for Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves to actually show what they mean. And that this, for me, it may be the end of Keir Starmer. They've got one last opportunity for us and our members. They need to reverse the years of austerity. They need to start putting money back in workers' pockets, investing in communities, protecting the vulnerable, making sure that people can feed their kids. Apologies, I can't stay for the rest of the meeting because I'd love to listen to the other speakers. But look, let's keep fighting. I will stay around for John McDonnell. He's always speaking a lot of sense, and I'm sure we were saying a number of sensible things tonight, more than me ranting on about, look, they're standing up for our people. But thanks for the opportunity to come and speak today, Kate. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Much appreciated. Thank you for coming along tonight and for the work that you do for the movement. And as Steve mentioned, also our next speaker really needs no introduction. He served as Labour Shadow Chancellor from 2015 to 2019, and in that time put forward a radical programme to end austerity and make sure the economy works in the interests of the many, not the few. If only John would deliver in next week's budget, eh? So we could all have a lot more hope. So over to you, John.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks, Steve, for the supportive words as well. Just on the point he made about we've never known anything like it in the run-up to this budget, I don't think we have really. You know, what budgets traditionally do, they give you the opportunity of setting out your agenda, and with a bit of bravado, actually, and also explaining to people that actually you understand what they're going through, and that's why you've designed the budget to tackle the problems that they're facing. But it's just, we've almost lost the budget before it even started. You know, we had the indication that there might be income tax level rises, and then they withdrew from that. Then we had this thing about the Wes Streeting leadership challenge, and that fell about. And then, and I agree with Steve, really, I was shamed this week about what was said by Shabana Mahmood, and she doesn't understand that what the rise of reform and the discussions around border controls are the symptoms. They're the symptoms of the economic austerity that we've had and the economic crisis that we had in 2008. And they're not the cause of it. They're not the cause of our economic problems. They're the symptoms of it. And so as a result of that, we get into this whole policy of trying to out-reform reform. And I just think, one, it's completely counterproductive, and it's actually dangerous because it feeds into reform's agenda. That's exactly what Nigel Farage wants. He wants Labour to be raising the profile of reform all the time, when actually what this budget could do is just turn it all around, create our own political agenda, and actually demonstrate to people that actually the economic circumstances that we face are inherent within our economic system and we can tackle them. Prem Seeker used to be one of our advisors in my advisory team. We put him in the House of Lords to help us when we went into government. And he's there. He's never really forgiven me for putting him in there now, but he's produced a fantastic report. And I'd like, if we can, to try and get that circulated widely as possible. And what it does, it sets the scene for this budget. And he sets out a sort of statistical analysis at the beginning. I'll run through some of the figures just so everyone knows what page we're on, really. It goes through it, really. Basic stats: 16 million people in poverty, 5 million children. We've got at least 1 million children now living in what are considered destitution, so literally haven't got the wherewithal to have survive, really. We've got 3 million dependent on food banks, 2 million pensioners in poverty. And what really just brings it home, really, there's a 10-year life expectancy gap between people living in the poorer areas and the richer areas. And the reason is because there's such a maldistribution of wealth and such a high level of inequality and poverty. The figures in Prem's document echo what we've been saying for a while. 50% of the population own less than 5% of the wealth. And then that stat that we're using at the moment, 50 of the richest families in our country own more than the 50% that the rest of us have. That's the stark issues of inequality. What we'd want this budget to do is to set out a 4-year program up until the next election where we're going to overcome poverty and reduce inequality dramatically. And it's not, I can't see it happening. I'm really worried. I just keep saying, what more does it take to convince the Chancellor that there's a need for a radical program of redistribution of wealth and income than those statistics? But it's also basic economics. Most people listening to this will know this is basic economics. If you have such grotesque levels of inequality and you have so many people who are living in, poverty or near poverty, it means basically the demand in the economy, the basic driver of growth, doesn't exist anymore. And as a result, if people can't afford the goods and services, they cannot therefore create the demand in which you grow the economy and you enable investment. And the other thing linked to the investment as well is that we have a specific phenomenon in our country in particular, which is that our city and finance sector is dominated by short-term profiteering. And as a result of that, there's a lack of investment. And Prem puts in his document a good stat, which is in 1970, £100 of profits made, literally only 10% would go in dividends. Now, £100 of profit is made, 60 to 70% is going in dividends. So people are becoming rich as a result of the short-termism and lack of investment. And in addition to that, Kat will talk about this later on, I'm sure. The role of the state is usually to step in where the private sector fails in terms of long-term investment. But what in this country has happened is we've privatized so much that actually it's become part of the short-term profiteering that's taken place. And it's scandalous. So the reality is this, just very, very briefly, what's needed is a program in which we tackle wealth and inequality and poverty by simple redistribution. It is as simple as that. We simply need to tax wealth, first of all. And there's a whole range of proposals we've been arguing for. Most of you know about it. Taxing capital gains at the same level as income brings in £14 billion worth of pounds. Tax dividends at the same rate as income, earned income, £6 billion. Tax dividends paid to foreign investors as well. We don't have a withholding tax in this country the way that other countries do. So what happens is the wealth is taken out of this country and we don't know whether tax is paid on it and the country of origin or not. I'd like to see people are talking about reform of council tax. I'd like to see land value tax introduced because a lot of wealth is held up within land itself, within capital values of ownership of land. Just increasing corporation tax by 1%, a tiny percentage, would bring in over £3 billion worth of taxation and income. And many people will know one of my favourites is tax reliefs, which there's over 1,000 tax reliefs. The Treasury doesn't even monitor them. A lot of it is just wasted money. But of course, tax avoidance. We're still in a situation where people are shipping money out to the Cayman Islands. We have an old industry in this country for tax avoidance, and we do little about it. And it's all part of this corporate welfare system that we have. And when it comes down to it, Richard Bergen's been putting forward some really good ideas, working with the Wealth Commission and others, about how we introduce a wealth tax. And the patriotic millionaires have made it clear they're supporting it. 2% above £10 million, and you can bring in about £24 billion worth of income as a result of that. And then people say, well, the wealthy will leave the country. Well, that doesn't happen in other countries, but if they do, there's an exit tax. You introduce an exit tax and it will bring in billions of pounds, and that's what works in other countries. So all of this really is readily available. My worry is that isn't what we're going to see in the budget next week. There might be some tax rises at the edges, but nothing on the scale that we need. Andrew Fisher and I did a report before the last election, which was basically saying what's happened in terms of public service investment since 2010. And we need about £85 billion a year just to get back to those levels. So you can see the scale of the problem that we have, but you can also see the scale of the challenge that we have in terms of what we need to do to bring about redistribution in this country. We are a rich country, the sixth richest country in the world. The assets are available to them. We just need to redistribute them and invest them in the long term. And in that way, we can meet Keir's demand to grow the economy. But you can't grow the economy, certainly on the basis of further austerity. And my worry is in the budget. There's rumours that there'll be other austerity measures coming forward that will cut the living standards of working people. Our job now, I think, is to make it very, very clear to the Labour leadership we're not going to tolerate that. We will oppose them at every point on that. We will work with all those other organisations campaigning, because that will lead to further division in our society, and it will literally give the stage to reform to again bring forward their racist policies as well. So that's the challenge over the next week. Press for radical change, which means redistribution of wealth and income in our society to tackle poverty and inequality but fend off any further cuts or austerity. Solidarity.
Thank you, John. That was as insightful as always, and really appreciate you coming along and speaking to it tonight. Our next speaker is Sarah Kilpatrick, who has recently been elected the Deputy General Secretary of the National Education Union. Sarah is a powerful campaigner against austerity and poverty, standing up for our teachers, the equality of our education in schools, and a better future for children across the UK. So over to you, Sarah. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks very much, Kate. It's nice to be here. I mean, there's an awful lot that John said there that I would echo. And working in education, the poverty that we see in children in this one of the richest countries in the world is genuinely shocking. So, you know, John gave you some really devastating figures. What we're looking at is 1 in 3 children living in poverty. That is at least 9 children in every classroom on average. So this crisis that we're facing is very real, and the NEU members that I'm here representing this evening see this, and they see it every day, and they are tackling it every day. So there is a real problem in education, and you know, if you're not funding education properly, then you are not planning for a future for your country. You are not providing for your society in any meaningful long-term way, because you are robbing children of the opportunities to bring about change for the better for this country. And what we see as a direct consequence, and it really is a direct consequence, is that desperation turns to anti-immigration, anti-asylum seekers, misogyny, racism. We see hatred growing, and we are seeing it now. We're watching the the end of our society in real time play out on our streets. I don't know how many of you were there in London when we had Tommy Robinson's mob come marching through, and that was a really unsettling experience, being surrounded by people with their views, abhorrent views, which never in my lifetime, and I'm in my 40s, never in my lifetime have been acceptable, now being widely accepted and shouted. And, you know, for that to just be a sort of expected norm now, that you are going to hear racist vitriol on the streets, you are going to hear misogynistic vitriol on the streets. It is alarming. And I don't know what the government's plans are, but they are nowhere near going to tackle the crisis that we are facing. And I can't stress it strongly enough. This is a crisis, and it is a crisis of successive governments making. Since 2010, we know that 2/3 of schools have less funding in real terms than they did in 2010. We are now in a position where 74% of schools have less funding than they did in 2010. We know about the child poverty statistics. We know what sort of conditions the families are living in and what sort of conditions the children are trying to learn in. We know that the school estate is crumbling. Our physical school buildings are falling down. Anybody who works in a school will tell you how bad the situation is. The ceiling tiles that are falling in because they've just been rained through for years, the blinds that you can't close, the windows that you can't open, the heating that doesn't work, the taps that have just been left because nobody's going to bother fixing them. We don't have any resources in school. We don't have buildings that are fit for purpose. The children are hungry, they are cold, they are exhausted. This is like Dickensian stuff. It is no wonder that children get sucked in by the lies told to them online by the likes of Andrew Tate and his ilk. Alongside all of that, what we've seen is the mass academization of our state sector. So schools are no longer run by their local authorities. They are no longer held accountable by a democratic group. They are now, in a majority sense, run by private business. And this is really frightening, because what we used to have was, you know, you'd have the head teacher and maybe a deputy head, and then the teaching staff, the support staff. That was the structure. The same amount of funding that was given to schools by the Treasury, so your money, your taxpayers' money, is now being spent on funding the pay packet of CEOs of Academy Trusts, some of whom earn £500,000. I'm looking at you, Harris. And the idea that this money is just being taken away from schools, it's being taken away from children and just gifted to profiteering fat cats who have no say in what the future of our children should look like. They should have no say in what education in this country looks like. You are seeing the mass exploitation of wealth take this just removal of money from our schools, lining the pockets of people who really don't deserve it. So what I would say is that the government have no clear answers to resolving this. I know that the teachers' pay increase is proposed to be 6.5% over 3 years, so a multi-year pay deal. But the real killer there is that they want it taken out of existing school budgets. There is no leeway in existing school budgets. We have no money. There is nothing spare. So I would urge the government to look again at the figures, find where the money can be found, because John's just outlined really clearly a lot of ways to find that money, and invest it, because unless you are investing in education, you are investing in nothing. If we don't educate our children, we have no future as a country. You must educate, you must offer some optimism, you must offer some hope.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks for the work that you do as well. It's invaluable, really. So thank you very much for coming along tonight. I just want to use this opportunity actually to plug the Trade Union Coordinating Group and Arise, without whom tonight wouldn't be possible. They're a campaigning alliance of 11 national trade unions, including the NEU and FBU. And I'm going to move on to Fraser Maguire from Arise, who can give us a little bit of an insight into the work of Arise and a few notices.
Thank you very much for that, Kate, and to all of our previous speakers. My name is Fraser. I'm one of the volunteer coordinators for Arise Festival, who are really pleased to be co-hosting tonight's meeting alongside the Trade Union Coordinating Group. I mean, we've already heard, and I'm sure as the rest of our speakers will lay out, that it's vital that the left has an alternative economic vision. We're not just here to be reactive to narratives from the Labour government, from Reform and the far right. We're here to put forward our own radical view of what a fair society and economy can actually look like. I think many of Sarah's comments especially resonated with me. So many young people, many of whom I know personally, who have been driven toward reform and the far right. It's been underpinned by cost of living, the collapse in our services, and there's just downward spiral of never-ending cuts and just not being able to afford the most basic, rent and your bills and your groceries. But what I'm here to do is give Arise Festival a bit of a plug and thank everyone who is taking part in tonight's session. It wouldn't be possible without the support of everyone watching. So all of our events are free, and we're always going to keep it that way. But we do ask that donations from supporters are given so we can keep bringing events like this together, especially at such important times for our movement. The left, I think now more than ever, needs spaces for political education and for discussion and for making our alternative arguments. So please do consider donating. There's a link being posted in the chat, and you can also consider becoming a friend of Arise. I hope people here have been to other events or will attend in future, many of which are online, and also at key national in-person events as well. It makes a huge difference, and it helps cover all of the costs with hosting and building the wide range of events. So thanks again for everyone, the speakers, everyone who's watching and taking part, and a massive thanks to everyone who supported Arise and the Trade Union Coordinating Group. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Fraser, for the work you do. And as you said, if you just have a little look in the chat, that'd be really helpful. So our next speaker is Ramona McCartney, who's from the People's Assembly, with a quick message to tell us about the plan for a demo outside Downing Street ahead of next week's budget. So thanks, Ramona, over to you.
Hi, thanks very much, Kate. And yes, being part of the People's Assembly for over a decade, we definitely agree that there is an alternative to the forever cuts. Because we think if you were just to listen to Westminster, you would think that there's no alternative at all. You think the best that we can hope for after 14 years of Tory austerity is a slightly slower version of the same thing. But we really, really need to look at all of the ways that we can oppose that, listening to all of your speakers here tonight, and things that have been laid out by Steve from the FBU, and how trade unionism and trade unions have a massive part in this to fight. And we have also Parliament. But if they're not listening, one of the biggest things that we have to do, and what we have been doing for over a decade, is fighting austerity. We have to fight it on the streets. We're more than a year into a Labour government now, and it was elected on a promise of change. People were promised decency, they were promised stability. We were promised a bit of breathing room at the end of the month, but it just hasn't happened. If you're a disabled person, you're under attack from the benefit system. If you're a parent hit by a child cap, if your council's on the brink of bankruptcy, if you spend hours in A&E, or you're just watching your library or a youth service close, you know that austerity has not gone away at all. So the People's Assembly, we want to start rebuilding that anti-austerity movement, and that's why we're calling for a protest outside Downing Street on the eve of the budget. So we would invite anybody that's on this call, if you're in London, please talk to your CLPs, talk to your branches, your trade union branches, talk to your friends. It's an after-work protest outside Downing Street at 6 o'clock. So we want people to come down there to make it absolutely clear that this is not about, you know, what the country can afford. It's about who our politics is organised to serve. Every pound poured into warfare while they squeeze welfare is it's just a political choice, and our answer has to be as clear. We demand welfare, not warfare. So if you're on this call, if you're in London, please get down to Downing Street 6 o'clock on the eve of the budget and make sure your voice is heard. And we say to Rachel Reeves that we will not accept what is she's about to spout on the budget. We're not going to sit back and listen to another budget of austerity. So please, spread the message, get down to Downing Street, see you there at 6 o'clock. And thank you very much for letting us join you tonight to let you know that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ramona, and I hope to see as many people there showing solidarity against what is probably going to be a not very good budget. So I just want to use this opportunity as well to give some shout outs to some of our viewers from Gateshead, Birmingham, Manchester, North London, South London, Stroud, Marlow, County Durham and Uckfield. So thanks again for joining us. Our next speaker is Kat Hobbs from We Own It. So why is a government which promised the biggest wave of insourcing for a generation continuing to outsource service to the private sector and leave key public services like our water and energy to make profits for shareholders rather than the public interest? So Kath is going to talk to us hopefully about the We Own It campaign and why public ownership should be key to the transformation of the UK economy. So thanks, Kat, over to you.
Thank you, Kate, and thanks to Arise and TCG and to all of you for being here tonight. It's great to be part of it. So We Own It campaigns for public services for people, not profit, and we've got campaigns going right now to bring Thames Water into public ownership, to make the railway truly publicly owned, and also to push back against private finance, new private finance in our NHS. And I'm going to focus on that last one because there's a really important action that you can take today, this evening, that will make a really big difference. So I'm going to say a couple of things about the kind of big picture vision that John and Ramona and others have talked about, but then I'm going to dive into a campaign, a specific campaign. You can do something about it, because I think with this government and with all of the disillusionment, it's really important that we push for victories in a really focused way and that we actually get some victories. So that's what we're about. And I'll talk about that. But obviously, in terms of the very big picture, and people have talked about, you know, we need a vision on the left. I think it's really simple. I think, like John said, we need to be having a wealth tax, taxing multimillionaires and investing that money in our public services. And we've got a very short video, it's about 1 minute, you can find it on our YouTube channel, which is about what we've lost from 14 years of cuts, all of the swimming pools, the libraries, the bus routes, all of the impact on our public services of austerity, which is absolutely taking money out of people's pockets and meaning that people haven't got the quality of life that they need. We've also talked about how we need to end privatisation, because that's privatisation is really the tax that no one is talking about and that Rachel Reeves is ignoring, because privatisation means that money is coming out of our pockets in terms of our water and our energy bills and our rail fares and flowing directly into the pockets of shareholders. It means that the council tax that you spend money on is actually ending up in tax havens because of all of the social care bill that councils have to pay. They end up paying it so much to private shareholders because so much of that industry is privatised. And then, of course, if we insist that the only way to build anything as a government is through private finance, then that is another form of privatisation tax. And so I'm going to just talk briefly about private finance. And I'm sure lots of you will remember Tony Blair's PFI deals and how much of a rip-off they were. But for anyone who doesn't know, essentially private finance and building hospitals, schools and prisons through private finance is pretty much like taking out a payday loan for your mortgage rather than buying something directly or buying your house directly. For a government, it makes absolutely no sense to be spending billions of pounds on debt when you could just buy directly. The Conservative government said goodbye to PFI in 2018, but this government is looking at the possibility of private finance to build new neighbourhood health centres. And the reason I'm talking about this tonight is because Rachel Reeves is going to announce whether or not they're going to do that on Wednesday at the budget. We know that PFI is a massive rip-off. It means that NHS trusts are spending up to 13% of their income on debt. The last 5 years of interest payments alone on these existing debts for private finance could have paid for the starting salaries of 50,000 doctors. And some NHS trusts are spending up to 27 times over for a hospital building. That's the worst example, that's in Essex. Absolutely outrageous. And what it means in terms of a human impact, we had an action and demonstration about this on Tuesday outside the Department of Health, is that, for example, somebody who spoke at that action, who's called Chrissy, she's on a waiting list, she's waiting for an operation. Her trust is spending 10 times more than they should be on their hospital. And so they're in massive debt. And in the meantime, she's on a waiting list and she's not getting seen. So it has a real impact on patient care. It's not just a kind of techie financial thing. And we need to tell those stories to show the government that they can't get away with introducing more new private finance. So Rachel Reeves is making the decision. It's being announced on Wednesday. At Labour's conference, 24 MPs said that they were still committed to the publicly owned and publicly funded NHS. Outrageous that it wasn't more, but we pushed for those 24. We've been working with decent Labour MPs behind the scenes over the past few months, and they've been asking questions and writing letters and having ministerial meetings. And now they've got tired of being quiet, which is a good thing. That's exciting. And so today, an early day motion, which is like a petition for MPs, has been published. It's already been signed by 35 MPs just in a day. And these MPs are saying, we don't want any new private finance. We don't want any of these rip-off payday loans in our NHS. We will not stand for it. So what I'm asking you to do today is write to your MP and ask them to sign up to that early day motion ahead of Wednesday's budget. Now, the government is trying to repackage PFI. So they're saying, oh, you know, over the years, they've called it, they've had PF2, they've had lift deals, they've had the Scottish model, now they're talking about the Welsh model, but people in Wales are saying this is a huge rip-off. So the Welsh mutual investment model is just PFI 2.0, it's just PFI dressed up. We've organised academics, so 53 accounting and finance academics have come out against this proposal. So there's some real momentum behind it, and I'm kind of pushing this because it's so easy to feel despairing with this government and to feel like we can't do anything, but actually they're really feeling the heat on this. They're really feeling the pressure. We had a piece in Labour List today, which is an outlet that we know that Labour ministers and MPs read. And so we know that they're under pressure. And writing to your MPs, I know it can feel frustrating and sometimes like you're banging your head against a brick wall, or always like that, depending on your MP. But I heard Richard Bergen MP saying just recently that MPs will log every single letter that they get, even if they ignore you. They know how many people are writing. They know what people are caring about from the letters that you write. So don't be discouraged. Please do write about this, because this is a specific decision. We cannot let them get away with it. All of those years of the NHS being drained of funding by bad private finance deals, this is something that we can do where we can't let them get away with it, and we know they're feeling the heat. So thank you for taking action, and thank you for being here, and for everything that you do.
Thank you, Kat, and thanks for everything that you do. And if we just have a look in the chat, there's a link to the early day motion that Kat was talking about. So if we could all get on that and email your MPs, it is important and it does make a difference. So thanks again. So our final speaker is a good friend of mine, Ian Byrne. Ian's the Member of Parliament for Liverpool West Derby and a tremendous campaigner whose efforts have helped to ensure the government has introduced a Hillsborough law, and who spearheaded the campaign to raise the £5 million required to build a new Zoe's Place Liverpool hospice. Ian's also well known for his efforts to eradicate the need for food banks with the Right of Food campaign, and he'll be telling us why that's so badly needed. So over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Kate. It's lovely to be on tonight and follow so many absolutely tremendous speakers. It's been a fantastic 45 minutes. And I just want to pick up on something Kat said, certainly about the possible return of PFI. And I think it's really important that we all understand that if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a bloody duck. So the Welsh mutual investment model, as it's potentially going to get dressed up now, it's PFI. It's going to come at a cost for us for generations, and I hope every MP rejects it out of hand. And I think today is hopefully the start of that. It's so catastrophic. Everybody knows it was an awful, awful policy, and I can't believe that it's getting countenance to come back again. However, we must resist that. So we're touching on the budget today, but as Kate alluded to, on Monday we launched the Right to Food Commission. And I'll go into a little bit around the nuts and bolts of that. But I think first, I think John touched on it. You know, we're seeing the huge inequality and hunger within our communities. You know, 2025 report from Trussell Trust said 14 million people are food insecure. I mean, that's a phenomenal number. 3.8 million children. My own constituency in Liverpool West Derby, 43% of kids are living in relative poverty. It's catastrophic from a moral point of view, and thank God it looks like that the Labour government are actually going to lift the two-child cap, which some of us were suspended for from the Labour Party for voting to scrap. So hopefully the pressure that's been built up by MPs, organisations, will come to their bear, and hopefully that will be lifted. So morally, you know, we're in an awful place with so many people going hungry, but economically, a 2021 report from Trussell Trust once again said the hardship and hunger was costing the economy £75 billion. £75 billion because of the inequality we're seeing in our society. So from a budget point of view next week, I would pray that the Chancellor looks at how we address that and how we can ensure that the inequalities that we're all seeing across our community and have been outlined so well over the last 45 minutes, it's the beginning to end that, to start narrowing that gap, to start making sure that that £75 billion, which could be saved by investing in people, lifts people out of hunger and hardship. So with that in mind, what we did on Monday, we've run the Right to Food campaign since 2019. It's got many cities and towns signed up to it across the United Kingdom. But we wanted to move further than that. And what we wanted to do was create a roadmap to put the Right to Food into legislation once and for all, a radical answer to the fact that, as I've said, we've got over 14 million people food insecure, morally, economically, but also politically appalling, because a lot of these communities that are suffering this hardship are now looking elsewhere. They're looking at politics in a different light, and they are going to be drawn to the far right. And John McDonnell nailed it before. it's economic reasons why people, for me, the vast majority of people are looking at a different way of doing things, and that's what the Labour Party can't countenance. It cannot allow that because we've got our hands on the levers of power. We can actually make that change. So with that in mind, as I said, we created a commission which will lay out over the next 9 months, create a roadmap. And how we're going to do that, we're going to go around the United Kingdom. We're going to go to Liverpool, Knowsley, which is in my constituency, Glasgow, Newcastle, Belfast, Cardiff, London. We're going to run select committee style sessions with expert people on the ground to give evidence, to build that roadmap. But also we're going to be running citizens' assemblies in them places. So we want people in them areas to come forward and outline how they see a right to food from a legislative point of view, looking in them communities. But equally so, we're going to create a model, a template. So communities across the United Kingdom can run citizens' assemblies. And that's what we want from Dundee to Truro. I want citizens' assemblies feeding in, using the model, what we're going to supply to communities, trade unions, anybody that can pull this together within their community. And then we can draw the data out, which we then need to inform that roadmap. So every single place of that United Kingdom has the opportunity to feed into that roadmap. So it's a comprehensive overview. Then what we do then is build that roadmap and build that legislative process. We're working with the TUCG. We've got general secretaries as part of the commission. We've got Sandra from the NEU. We've got Sarah Woolley from the Bakers Union, who's vice chair with myself. We've got a fantastic chair in Barry Margetts, you know, who's a really world-renowned expert on nutrition. And we've got commissioners from Amnesty, Just Fair, trade unions. We've got doctors from Alder Hospital in Liverpool. We've got a whole array of people who are going to work, assist and help to bring this forward. And then I'd say at the end of it, the idea to be next September, just before conference season, we'll have a document which will be an academically rigor, authentic, politically robust document, which then we could give to the Prime Minister and say, if you want a radical policy which has transformed the lives of millions and millions of people across this country, well then there you go. And that gives the Prime Minister the chance to implement that, whoever that might be, whether it be Keir Starmer or if rumours about somebody else. That's not for me to comment on. However, whoever holds that position, we want to be able to give them a document which is authentic and, as I said, has been pass-proofed, stress tested, and could do what we want to do, which is to begin to end the hunger we see in our communities. And for me, as I said, economically, from a budget perspective, it's a no-brainer. Morally, it's what we should be doing as socialists within this country. And politically, it's what we've got to do, because we don't change the economic outlook for the millions of people who are struggling at the moment, as they've outlined. Well, then who can blame them for saying, well, the Tories will give us 14 years of austerity. The Labour government hasn't affected my position as it is now. So we're going to look elsewhere. So it's on us. It's on us to make sure that people do not look towards a far-right government and we don't go down that nightmare wormhole. So I'll leave it there. If anybody wants to get involved, please drop me an email and I'll be delighted to point them in the right directions from a citizens' assembly point of view and give them as much information as I can. But please join us on this journey, because we feel as though that could be one of the radical pillars of what we want a Labour government to do. So the next 12 months are going to be busy affecting that change. Thanks very much for asking me to speak tonight. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thanks so much, Ian, and thanks so much for the work that you do. We've put in the chat the link to your website, and I really hope, like you say, people will get involved, send emails, come to the tour that you're doing around the UK. I'll certainly be there. It shouldn't have to be something that we fight for, right, of food, but you know, this is the world we live in at the minute, and it's so important as well to support true socialist MPs like Ian in everything that he does. Now, we were hoping to be joined by Bel Ribeiro Addy, but unfortunately she's had some transport issues, so won't be able to join us tonight, but she does send solidarity, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from her in an upcoming call. So I guess all that leaves me to say is many thanks to all the speakers for joining us tonight and showing us that there is a better way. I do hope Rachel Reeves is listening, but I wouldn't hold my breath. So our job is to keep organised and to just make this happen, make change happen. Thanks to everyone who tuned in as well, and to Arise and the Trade Union Coordinating Group for organising tonight's event. Our discussion has showed we don't need to mirror the rhetoric of reform. We can change people's lives for the better. We've just got to believe it, and we've got to have the political will to do so. So solidarity, comrades, and thank you so much for coming along again tonight.